while back, I was having a conversation with my dad. He said, you know what, if I could go back in time and say one thing to myself when I was a 30-year-old kid starting the family business, you know what I would say? And I said, Dad, what would you say? And he said, son, here's what I would say. I would say, you are your own worst enemy. And I thought about this. And what I said back was, Dad, I thought I was your worst enemy. So I think what my dad was getting at there is a universal experience, which is that we can all be our worst enemy, our biggest critic, and our harshest judge. Unless we're Donald Trump, then we don't judge ourselves at all. Or Bill Clinton, I'm going to keep this even politically. Then we're narcissists and we don't judge ourselves at all. But for the rest of us, who have a red and beating human heart and working neural circuitry, we are oftentimes, we're like putting ourselves under the microscope and we're slamming our internal gavels and we're delivering very harsh verdicts against ourselves. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because I got a message from one of my patrons over at Patron. She's very thoughtful, and I want to share a little bit of her message with you and then unpack it a bit and maybe deconstruct this internal judge and this judging process. Okay, you ready? So first of all, she tells me that she's had a Zen teacher and a Zen community for a while, but something has begun to feel off in her relationship with both. And this is always kind of an interesting experience for those of you who sit or with a group or have a teacher and have moved on. Like at some point you feel the baby kicking against the walls of your stomach. The baby in this metaphor is practice, and the walls of your stomach or womb are a metaphor, I guess, for the situation you're in, teacher and community. So my friend here is like feeling the urge to leave the community, and so I think she did so. So she's kind of on her own. And she says, as I write this, a question keeps coming up. May I ask, what am I missing? I continue to observe how pride and fear of failure are still a strong thread holding me together. And she says, I went through some sort of dismantling during a recent retreat and managed to find a way to hold myself together again, like trickery. What am I missing? So it's an interesting question. What she's saying is, like, she did kind of a dismantling at a recent retreat. And I'm just interpreting now, but it sounds like what she's saying is she got rid of or emptied herself of or experienced a break from the pride and the fear of failure that are threading her together. She unthreaded it. But then she says after the retreat, it got rethreaded. This pride and this fear of failure. So, like, the question is, okay, you might want to pause and ask yourself, what are your reoccurring, humiliating inner problems or states or issues, right? And through your practice, they stay with you. They persist. And you practice and you practice and you can't seem to get rid of them, no matter how hard you try. And then you start judging yourself for having these flaws. And then you maybe ask yourself the question that she's asking. What am I missing? What am I getting wrong? Why do these problems, these bad attitudes that I don't want, why do they persist? Just a little FYI before I dust off the old voice box here and get started. I wrote about this question over on my Patreon page, link in the video description below. The blog post is called "What Am I Missing?" So I unpacked this question more over there if you want to read about it, but it's stuck in my craw, and that's why I wanted to explore it again today. Again, that question, what am I missing? Or why do I suck? Why do we suck? You know, I had a moment many years ago when I sat down on the cushion during a bad period for another day of trying to do zazen despite my internal bonfires throwing up smoke into my head, right? And I found myself thinking, God, it's happening again. I feel terrible about life and about myself. And I kept trying to tweak my meditation to do it right so that I could kind of pass through this phase or this state, right? And then this clarion call came up inside of me, and it said, just because you feel bad doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong, okay? I'm drawing my words out now because this is important. You know, it was a real bell ringing in my head, a light bulb going off over my tuchus. Is this the tuchus? No, tuchus is the rear end. Anyways, just because you feel bad, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing your meditation wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're living wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean that something is missing, right? I mean, okay, if you've just murdered someone and you're looking at the blood on your hands and you're thinking, I feel bad, maybe I did something wrong, you're probably right. But if you're doing a meditation practice and these feelings of angst and anxiety and frustration, if they keep coming up, that's just your inner state. You just feel bad. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. And the reason I'm focusing on this is because the tendency for me is to try and move internally, move into a different internal climate, come out of that inner rain and into a place of sunshine and smiles and rainbows and unicorns and inspiration and satori, etc., right? But sometimes it is just raining inside. What I found to be helpful is manifesting present moment awareness. I talk about this a lot on this channel. Present moment awareness on a meditation cushion or in a moment of life means there's seeing of the inner state that is not pleasing, that is disturbing, right? But instead of trying to get rid of it or judging yourself for it, beating yourself up for it, trying to run away from it in some way, rather one sits in it, sits right in the bad feeling. Boy, that sounds like a cliche when I spit it out, but there's a cultivation of bringing your biggest fears and insecurities, the stuff you're ashamed about yourself, bringing that stuff onto the cushion with you and sitting with it and breathing into it and manifesting and developing a curiosity about it, right? So there are a lot of things that I don't like about Zen practice. I think it can be very severe, very strict, very colorless, and I wouldn't mind having my hair back. So there's a lot of things I don't like about Zen practice, but one of the great things about this lineage and about this tradition is that it does not judge. Really, it doesn't judge, okay? There are no 10 commandments, right? The lineage that I trained in, we didn't talk a whole heck of a lot about the ethical precepts. We didn't run around putting morality rocks in our slingshots and shooting them at each other either, okay? There was a certain amount of freedom. And the great thing about this is there's an invitation to sit with your demons, right? To allow them to arise on the cushion and to not judge yourself for them, but to hold them, sit with them, feel just how rotten you are, and then feel it in your body, and then have the experience of coming out the other side of it and realizing, oh, you know what? I'm still here. That wasn't such a big deal. So the name for this practice of sitting with your demons is becoming one with them, okay? I told this story before. I always get embarrassed when I retell stories on this channel, but what are you going to do? I went into Sanzen once with Sanzen is koan practice, and I went into Sanzen once with a Roshi, a Zen master. And I was having some real difficulties in our community. Ironically, I was having the difficulties because of this teacher, which is interesting. And so I came to this teacher and, you know, I wanted to get some mojo going with him. And I wanted to sort of show myself to him a little bit and see if we could work together. The answer was no, but I said to him, I have all these difficult emotions going on right now. I feel terrible about myself. I feel terrible about my surroundings, and I just can't seem to make this bad feeling go away. What do you suggest, boss? And he's like looking at me and he's like, oh yeah, you know, emotion. What can you do when you have these emotions? He's like, you just have to like, oh. And he starts doing this. Sorry for that. Sorry, I apologize. He starts doing, you know, this whole thing. And he's like, sort of getting on my wavelength. And he's like, oh, you know, he's like feeling my mojo. And he's like, oh, and he's doing these. He's just like manifesting in real time what I might be feeling inside. And I'm watching him and I'm feeling a little bit foolish. You know, it's almost like when you have a kid and the kid has stubbed his toe and you're like, I know, cry it out, you know? And that's what he was doing, but it actually kind of worked. And I think the message that he was telling me, that he was teaching me, was something along the lines of, you become one with the emotion. Become one with your pride. Become one with your fear of failure. So for me, what this means is trying to just do my breath practice on the cushion or out in the world and letting this feeling of pride or fear of failure, letting it arise to the point where I can feel it without the judgment filter. Okay? Feel it. Become one with it. Manifest it like it's a demon. Become the demon. Become the horrible, horrible, horrible feeling, right? Become the fear of failure. Become the pride. What I mean is without filter, without judgment, without the judgment filter, okay? So we live on this planet, okay? And we have an organ between our ears. We also have organs in our stomach, like the digestive organs, right? And when food comes into our body, we digest it and we pull out nutrition, and that allows us to keep on living. And what an amazing process that is. It feels good, and it's a miracle that we can basically pull energy from the ground, from plants, from animals, if we're not vegetarian. pull that into our body and turn that energy into our life, But there's a side effect from this process, right? You may have gone to the bathroom once or twice in your life. I know I have. Like, you can't process food without producing a certain amount of stinky waste. Well, perhaps this organ between our ears works somewhat the same way. We're processing life up here. We're processing it. And perhaps a certain amount of stinky waste is produced from that processing. And that stinky waste is, for example, with my patron, a certain amount of pride and a fear of failure. Okay, the problem is not poop. Poop is not the problem. I hope you never blame poop, right? The problem is what to do with it. The problem is waste management, right? The problem is what you do with those problems that arise from this processing of life, from this life process, right? Because that's all it is. So you can see what I'm trying to do is remove the judge, get rid of the judge, and just look at what is. Because the more we're able to look at and become one with what is, I just think the more interesting life is, and the freer we are. And freedom is the point of a Zen practice. Freedom from suffering, illusion, ignorance, greed, selfishness, etc. Freedom. Final point I want to make is to speak to what my patron was saying about leaving her community. So one is in a very vulnerable place when one leaves one's spiritual community and one's teacher. Like, when you're in that space, you're held by that space, and you can sort of continually judge yourself by and make comparisons with your community. And you usually have a teacher hovering over you through whom you can see your practice and even certain aspects of your life. So while this is this is like teamwork for your spiritual practice, and it is totally priceless. There's two of the jewels, three Buddhist jewels there, Sangha and Buddha, or teacher, right? So these things are very important, but now it seems like my patron is leaving her community and her teacher. And now it seems like she has a home practice, right? She's on her own. Listen, so am I, man. I don't have a Sangha that I really consistently sit with. I don't have a teacher checking in on me, ringing the bell when I don't answer my koan correctly and sending me back to my cushion. I'm on my own. And I gotta tell you folks, one of the truly great things about being on your own is that you don't have a teacher looking down at you, tweaking you perpetually with their teachings, God bless them, and you don't have a community out there perhaps reflecting you back to yourself a little bit sternly at times, perhaps offering you how to do the form and how to behave within their community and what your practice should look like. You're free of all of that. You're on your own. You've got absolutely no one judging you. So baby, don't judge yourself. You're free. Be free. Cultivate a little curiosity. Like, you get to look at yourself now. You are wearing Gaiji's invisible ring. You get to walk around invisible and see. Only the thing you get to see is yourself. So you've got pride. So you've got a fear of failure. See it, be it, feel it, manifest it on the cushion. Don't judge yourself. You have to sit dead center, right smack dab in the middle of the shitstorm. If you spend some time with a lot of these Zen people, you start to notice they have a real sense of humor about themselves. Like they get it. Some of these old Zen masters, they laugh at themselves. Like my teacher used to look at his own falling apart body, and he would just have a great big belly laugh about it. Even when he was in severe physical pain, he would just be laughing at his own 107-year-old, completely dilapidated human person, mentally and physically. And he would just have this great big laugh and be entertained by it. As a result, he was very, very compassionate towards the people around him. So in closing, the real reason to kill that inner Judge Judy is that inner Judge Judy is also doing a number on the people in your life, judging them, right? So stop judging yourself so harshly, you'll stop judging others, and there'll be a nice big circle of love going through your heart and through the hearts of the people around you. In my humble estimation. Listen, speaking of love, if you love these videos and you want to support this channel, there is a URL right here where I am pointing, and then if you go below here into the description of this video, there's a Patreon link where you can find that essay I talked about earlier, as well as a PayPal link where you can buy me a coffee or whatever if you're so inclined. I offer these videos for free, and I absolutely love doing them. However, I have bills to pay, and y'all help me pay them by supporting this channel financially. So I appreciate that, but if you don't want to, don't worry about it, man, and don't judge yourself, man. And if you're so inclined, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and leave some comments below. That helps invigorate and enliven this channel. But if you don't want to, don't judge yourself. All right, I'm out. Cheers.